Just hoping to welcome everybody back to a session, Flourish Together session, all about social value measurement. We've got a session around theory of change, and we've got other sessions on this topic that people can look at as listen again options. This session is forming part of our Time to Grow programme, where we've looking at how to help people measure their impact and value and communicate that better. And what we're hoping to do for the next probably 40 minutes is start to have a look at, how is it happening in different people's organisations? What does it look like when it's done well? And we're going to be going through a whole range of different sort of methods and ways of doing this. It's all well and good thinking about, what your impact might be, but how do you really know you're having that impact? How do you go about measuring it that's cost effective and easy, and that you've got the capacity to actually do, and the skills and the knowledge to do? Some of this is you'll be doing without realising it. Some of it you will be needing to think about and develop in light of, developing your ideas and working out what your impact actually is. A lot of it you have to actually ask your community. You can't just guess at this. Well, you can, but you have to check back in with them, otherwise you're kind of making it up. And actually it's really cathartic, and it's really it's heartwarming and confidence building to do this kind of stuff, because it reassures you that you're doing what you set out to do and it's happening. All these other brilliant things are happening that you weren't aware of, and it helps you really demonstrate your track record, your credibility, and depending on the levels or the depths to which you go at looking at this, can give you all sorts of data for different purposes that we've talked about. So it can give you data for strengthening your funding bids. It can give you data for winning awards. It can give you data for your marketing and your website. Whether it's numbers and facts, or whether it's quotes, testimonials and videos, whether it's something else. It's a really useful thing to do, and it can also help build trust and build relationships with your beneficiaries, with your funders, with your wider stakeholders. So, it's not this is not an extra bolt-on. This is kind of a cultural thing that all charities, social enterprises, community organisations need to do and are doing to some degree, but doing it and being aware and doing it with intention is the key. So that's what we're going to look at here. We've just spent some time, and I'd recommend people go and do a kind of listen again on our sort of theory of change session. We've walked through theory of change, and in a nutshell, when we were looking at theory of change and what has happened as a result, you need to know what it is you're tracking. And by understanding what your theory of change is, what your overall kind of vision and goals and objectives are, you can then track them and work them out. And so we were, through the nature of working through some theory of change tools, we're working about what people's sort of resources and inputs and partners and resources, and what people need to actually make these things happen. We were looking at what people's specific activities are. We were looking at what the outputs are and what the outcomes are. It's put across in a slightly different format in the theory of change tool, but this again puts in a different perspective. Sometimes you need to hear things 2 or 3 times to have it make sense, and sometimes you have to kind of view it through different kind of angles to have it make sense. And the angle that we're looking at this is that in order to now start to move on in the purple bit around, impact and value, we know what are our inputs, what are our activities, what are the outputs and outcomes, what is then the impact as a result of that, and then in terms of this ripple effect, how can you put a value around some of that? So these are the things that we're starting to look at. And we heard through conversations that we've had, lots of people in our network are creating all sorts of impact and value around education and training, health and well-being, might be around social inclusion, might be around social justice, might be about environmental improvement. And these are the things that we're going to start to sort of work around and work through. So in order to do that, I've got another nice neat tool. I can't take credit for this. This is Nikki Dickens, a Profit for Purpose, who we often work with, that put this tool together. I just think it's really simple. So this is why I brought it to the table to go through. And so this is just recapping what I was just talking about there. You know, we're kind of picking up, you know, the bit that helps us work out what is our social value and how you work out the difference between these different buzzwords. You know, this, as I've said before, goes beyond just monitoring and evaluation. You know, where you're ticking boxes, you're reporting certain things for your funders or whatever. This helps you really communicate and potentially start to quantify the ripple effect that you're creating. And it also helps, you know, we talked before about, it helps you take back control over what's going on here. It's very easy to jump and lurch, you know, and pinball between what different funders want or what different, you know, influencers who have budget in your community want to see. And you can, you know, everybody's leaping around for these pots of money or for the contracts or for whatever. And this actually also helps you work out what to say no to sometimes as well. So I'll kind of run through it, and the goal from some of this stuff eventually helps you work out what we call your key value indicators. So when I say take back control, instead of working to other funders' objectives and other funders' criteria and eligibility points, this helps you work out, here's our vision, here's the way we want to see the world for the better, here's our mission and our kind of objectives of how we're going to go about doing that, here's our solutions, and here's the impact we aim to make. You start to then pin down the impact that you can have and the vehicle for social change, whether it's arts, environmental improvements, whether it's crafts and creativity, drama, running skills workshops in a particular thing, all these things that we talked about. And you can then work out with the vehicle that you're using and the impact that you're creating, where you know you're having the most value and making the most difference, or where as an organisation, as a community, as a team, as a set of people working together, where you intend to have the most impact, and focusing on that rather than lurching about. And you can set out your stall and really build your track record and really create good knowledge and information around the value that you're creating in the particular way you're doing it, so that within a couple of years of tracking what you're doing and showing the depth to which you're creating impact and value in those areas, you know, no one's in any doubt as to why they should be backing you. No one's in any doubt as to the track record and the impact and the quality of social value, or the creation of social capital that you're kind of creating. So this is what these tools are all about. This one in particular is the kind of a starting point, hopefully an easy output and outcome always used to confuse you. Hopefully this tool will help. You know, so let's run through it just quickly for anyone that's not been reading this slide. So an output is what has happened as a result. So we're going to talk about this lady, Jenny. Jenny's been on a course. She's been on this confidence building course. Box tick number 1 is an output. Jenny attended the course. The bum on the seat that I kind of referred to in a previous session, the bum on the seat is the output, you know, and that's lovely. You know, somebody turned up. Wowee, you know, and sometimes that's all funders want to know. They just want to track and measure certain stats. But what you as a social change maker want to know is, so what happened as a result? And this is where all of this kind of impact and value starts to happen. So, you know, the outcome is then what happened as a result. So that's the difference between the two. One is, you know, something physically happened. The outcome is what then started to change as a result. So as a result of Jenny turning up in this course, Jenny's improved her confidence, which is, you know, great. Jenny might have built her skills, might be another outcome. She might have started to feel better about herself. She might have started to consistently come to something and start to feel part of a community. She might have done all sorts of things. You'll think of your own kind of examples. Can we just clarify what are the stakeholders? Absolutely. Sorry, we've talked about stakeholders a few times, but stakeholder is anybody who's got a vested interest in your organisation. And we'll be talking about these in different ways in a minute. But in this case, the stakeholder is a direct beneficiary. Jenny directly benefits from turning up to this course. She's a direct beneficiary. She's one of several stakeholders. Jenny's a stakeholder. Jenny's family are potentially stakeholders, although they don't realise it. They're benefiting as a result of Jenny coming on this course. There'll be others that you'll start to see when we start to look at this. There's wider stakeholders as well as people that directly and indirectly benefit. We were getting to the point where Jenny's turned up, Jenny's improved her confidence. The impact of Jenny improving her confidence, building her skills, getting a kind of consistency of whatever it is she's doing. As a result of all of these things, Jenny's secured a job, you know, the pinnacle. You know, it might not be secured a job. Jenny might have gone on to another training course. Jenny might have joined a new group that she hadn't been to before. Jenny might now be leaving the house more frequently and is interacting with other people in the community. You know, Jenny might now, you know, as a carer, if you know what I'm saying, she, you know, be better able to support, you know, who she's caring for. It could be all manner of things that then the ripple effect that starts to happen as a result of the outcomes and the impact that you start to create. And what is the value of this? When you start to think about, well, what's the value? This is a case of thinking, well, whose value is it anyway? And just as somebody was asking then, what are these stakeholders? They're different types of people and things. So I'm going to move on to that slide and I'll probably jump back to this one in a minute. And I'm hoping you're having a little doodle and a little think as to have a think, who are the Jennies or whoever's in your organisation? You know, who are the people and what's happening? So you can be doodling down the side how this is relevant for you. You know, you can be doodling and looking at, I'll just come back to that, I'll give you a teaser there and then take it away. You know, what's happening as a result of people coming to your stuff. What's changing, do you imagine, or do you know as a result? What are they now starting to do differently, do you think, or do they tell you? Or how might you find that out? We're going to go through. And who might this be of value to? So in terms of who this might be of value to, so in the case study of Jenny, and you can have a think through in your mind, your own sort of scenario of your own project or organisational activities. Jenny, you know, directly, Jenny's, you know, she's now got self-worth. This is a value to Jenny because she's got more self-worth. She's got this job, you know, she's got more money in her pocket. So she's now able to pay off some debts, you know, afford to feed a family and, you know, maybe even take a holiday in a year or two's time. Whatever that scenario might play out to be, Jenny's benefiting directly in various ways. There are indirect people benefiting from this. So Jenny's family's benefiting, you know, she's got increased health and well-being. Her children might be benefiting because Jenny might have a little bit of spare cash so that it can take up a new hobby or some other thing, you know, that's got maybe some economic benefit, you know, attached. Her new employers benefiting from Jenny's skills. You know, they may or may not have had somebody like Jenny with her skills and attributes before in their organisation, so they're benefiting from Jenny being there. And local shops, you know, we talked about purchasing. There's a local economic benefit from Jenny having more money to spend, clearly. We've then got wider benefits. So the government, you know, will benefit from savings in welfare benefits and increased tax payments, you know, in a kind of brass tacks kind of way. The school that Jenny's children are going to are benefiting because the children are happy at school. They might be more settled. The children might be interacting more and in different ways. And the local economy benefiting, you know, because more money is being spent. You know, and there are other benefits, you know, that might be happening, you know, as a result of a particular stakeholder's journey. I wonder if anybody's got any thoughts. So we could probably take an example or two if you've had a chance to have a little think through there. Who, you know, maybe one or two people might want to just share an example of who, you know, naming no names or abbreviating names. Anybody want to share an example from within their own organisation, or I can kind of make some up, knowing what it is you all do. Feel free to come.
We've got some from the wave of change. So it's not the thing I'm doing now, but it is a thing that I do and I'm part of. So we run a program for ladies who live in Stockport or unemployed. So some of it is digital skills, which is obviously where I pop in, but also for some people it's developing their confidence. For some people it's I don't know how to write a CV. So we try and include lots of different things. But when we talk to people who've already done it, so for example, we had one lady who came on and she wanted to apply for different jobs, but she wasn't confident enough to do it because she felt her digital skills weren't there. So we showed her how to do some things online. She got some practice doing that. And then she got like a job, like a temporary position, supporting people who were doing the census. So she went from she came on our workshop, that gave her the confidence and with these extra skills to then apply. So she her direct, she came on the course. So that was like the first bit. So we ran the program. So that would be the output. And she came on it. The outcome was that she developed some new skills and increased her confidence. The impact of that was that she applied for a job and she got it. And I've lost it with the last one. I kind of get it.
She is Jenny, isn't she, in a way? And I guess that's a good example to show that this isn't just a fictitious thing. And I'm sure you know of examples like this. I might just quickly jump to a couple of examples around perhaps those people that aren't running programs like this are doing something completely different. So I'm thinking of the likes of Carol. Carol's doing this sort of great food and catering organisation, and she's selling goods. You might be selling goods to the public, and so we've got if we take it a step back, where am I? Just here. So what happened? So Jenny bought a healthy salad. Jenny bought a healthy salad, or Jenny bought a vegan version of a greasy burger, but in a much more healthy way.
Like that.
Yeah, as a result, Jenny had an affordable, healthy meal. That was what that's affordable, healthy meal. The impact of that is that she's reducing her calorie intake, and over time, by eating these healthy meals, she will potentially start to lose a little bit of weight, feel better about herself, and there's all manner of ripple effects as a result of that.
You kind of picked me at the perfect time, because this has really helped, because I was remembering a guy that I actually helped back a good few years ago, and I actually met him in a pub this was years ago, when I was delivering some juices to one of the workers there, and he was overhearing. I didn't know he was listening to me, and anyway, he asked me privately if I could help him, and that was a very good experience for me in terms of a confidence boost, because he was somebody who didn't want to eat any vegetables whatsoever. And I told him that he was going to be a bit of a challenge because of the plant-based food that I do. And I said to him, well, I'll sit with him and devise a menu. And I did some trial meals with him, and he tried it and he liked it. And within the week, he was ordering meals from me. And within a month, he went to see his mum, and his mum said to him, "Oh, your skin's really cleared up." Because he was just always in the pub from around 11 o'clock in the morning, and he used to do a bit of nighttime gambling as well. And he said that from me providing the meals and stuff, his skin had cleared up, he had more energy. So these are the impacts that you're talking about.
And there's a few in there from what you're describing. So so there's the physical and mental health benefits. There's some attitudinal and behavior change going on there. And in terms of the value on that, you think, how do you put value on somebody in this way? Direct benefits to him might be so let's move to this one, and we can plop it on here. So, you know, this chat, some of this works, you know, it's more self-worth, feeling fitter and got more energy, depending on somebody's circumstances. If somebody's got more energy and feeling better about themselves, you know, they might start to have improved relationships with their children or with their families. They might start to, I went to what, you know, a quick example, it comes up later. Horseherd are an organisation that work with people using horses as a way of kind of coaching people. It sounds bizarre, bit Mr. Ed, but it works. It's called Equine Facilitated Learning, and they work with veterans amongst other people. And, you know, and there was an example of a guy who, as a result of having gone to their sessions, thought things through, had some time with a horse and with a human to kind of work through what they were doing. That, you know, they've now gone on a date for the first time in 20 years.
Wow.
And it's these sorts of, you think, oh, initially, not only are those great sound bites and great testimonials, and they prick people's ears up, it's like that heartwarming tale that Alicia was talking about earlier, where you can give real world, you know, hard-hitting examples. But in addition to having these physical benefits for that person, indirectly, you know, there's various ways people's families might benefit. The other, where people are buying from their new stuff. So granted, in your case there, Carol, that, you know, the betting shop or the gambling people might see a reduction in sales, but that's income that can be then spent in other ways, on whatever, on clothing at independent shops. Where
he actually bought a smoothie maker.
There you go. Good stuff.
Which is great.
But that tells me, you know, if they're making smoothies for themselves, they might be sharing them with other people. Be having that knock-on effect with the wider community or their family and friends on
definitely
their attitudes around food and the relationship with food and that sort of thing, and eating. Thank you. But in the wider picture, you know, this isn't just wasn't this nice for them. More widely, you know, let's say somebody in their position, they might be seeing a counsellor that's costing, you know, 50 to 80 pounds an hour. They might be having regular visits to their GP, which can be anything from, you know, £100 upwards for an hour. There might be a number of ways in which the public purse is being saved through not needing certain treatments, reduction in medication costs and things like this. And, you know, we've talked already about sort of the local economy and stuff. So, you know, as a result of somebody improving their physical and mental health, there's naturally always a whole raft of savings from the public person. You know, there's something called the cost unit database. Because you think, how do you put figures on this? There's all sorts of policy reports out there which will have little summaries and sound bites that relate to all of the things that you're doing. We talked about this with the PETAL report. This is where the PETAL report links in with this, because various policy reports, whether they're health and wellbeing reports, environmental reports, you know, education reports, asylum seeker and refugee reports, all sorts of stuff that's showing, you know, the state of the sector and what's going on, will have information about the financial cost, how much the government is spending in millions and billions on such and such a thing. And you can use this data to say, you know, this is the state, this is what's going on, my interventions are doing this, this and this. And we know, you know, for example, so I've got a bundle here, I'll just throw them out as examples of what this cost unit database can tell you. So it's basically an example of, and I can show people over lunch if anyone's interested. It's a spreadsheet with, and some of it's a bit out of date now, and some of it's a bit more current, but it puts the cost unit on all sorts of things, from anything from, you know, what it costs the police to respond to an antisocial behaviour intervention, what it costs to support somebody experiencing domestic abuse, what it costs to go through the court system, what it costs for different types of training, what it costs to support a young person not in education or training, for example, in a year is like over nearly £10,000. What it costs for a homeless, you know, if you're reducing homelessness, what it costs to put people through a homeless support application, you know, it's like nearly £3,000. So, and there's all sorts of other things, you know, children in respite care and residential care, mental health support costs, what it costs, you know, for a trip to A&E, these sorts of costs. You know, if you're reducing the impact of some of these things, then there's a good chance there's a way to put figures and a value, or at least demonstrate how you're not just having a nice time, which you will be. You're also achieving all of these other sort of social ripple effects, for want of a better phrase. So we'll come back to some of that, but that's just to give you a sense, to try and
back on now as well.
All right.
There you go, she's back.
Sorry about that. I think either my internet went down. Well, it must have done because I got kicked out. We're back in the room. Got a bit of respite from me for a minute there. That I was just trying to say that tool hopefully starts to take the mystique out of this. It starts, these silly buzzwords that get used are all happening anyway around you, and it's just picking out what these things are and putting it into statements and phrases and examples, that demonstrates this stuff. So hopefully you can use this kind of tool at your leisure to work through these empty boxes and to doodle out your own versions, and it will soon start to show you a picture of what's going on in terms of this stuff. What I've got to show you next, so I've got a pretty picture first. I want to make sure people get a decent lunch break, so I'm not going to go into all of these case studies and examples, and we've got some others coming up, but there's oodles of ways that people are making and creating value. And we've got other examples of our social value measurement type webinars where I go into a bit more detail about these case studies and how they're all creating impact and value. I wanted to touch on the different ways of doing this, because that's ultimately what you need to know. How do you go about this stuff is what we're going to cover for the next 10 or 15 minutes before we have a break. So there's different, what we were alluding to through the session so far, and let me just, what we were alluding to is that there's different, different people have different perceptions on what's important. I mentioned before about the SROI, social return on investment. That's, as I was just talking about, cash and brass tacks, but basically that there's putting a cash value on things is one way of looking at things. There are putting a locality lens on this, and there's another method called LM3 where in addition to looking at what the cash savings are to the public purse, that you're looking at what's actually happening in your local area. So the New Economics Foundation and a few other organisations are looking at what are you keeping in your local area. There's a lot of talk about place-based stuff and locality-based things, and there's funds happening for particular areas. LM3 is a method where you're not only tracking where the pound's being spent in its various ways, or where the pound's being saved, you're looking at where that's happening locally. So I can tell you by looking through my bank statements for Flourish, or by looking through our invoices and our partners and who we work with and where we spent money on catering, on practitioners, on shops that we've spent money in for materials and anything else. I could tell you and put a figure on how much we've spent in the last year or the last 5 years to make it look a bit more impressive, on how many thousands of pounds have been spent in the local area, for example. And that's evidence, and that's quite a hefty thing, and that's things people underestimate. People totally underestimate the amount of money that voluntary community sector organisations and group are putting back into the local community. These funds that you get, these contracts that you get, the sales that you generate, and how you're spending those to operate what you do is all giving value back to society, the local economy, and all that sorts of things like that. You've also got this thing called outcome stars, which I bet a lot of you will have come across before. So outcome stars are the track well-being. That HEART stands for health and well-being. There are standard tools. So there's something called WEMWEBS, which is a standard mental health improvement tool, and it's an accessible tool that people can use, kind of industry standard, tracking against about 8 indicators on how people's health and well-being, or mental health and well-being, is improving. But I'd often say, come up with your own. We can do a better job than that and make it relevant for your community. And we can show you how to use outcome stars. Any of you coaches will have come across those, and there's probably people in this group who have used that, where you'll have done them yourself, where you, on a scale of 1 to 5, at the beginning of whatever it is you're running, or at the beginning of starting a meal plan service with someone, or at the beginning of a program, how are people feeling about X, Y, and Z at the beginning? And then, you know, you're doing it for us through the Time to Grow program, you know, and then middle and end, how have things changed? And sometimes it moves up, and sometimes it moves down, either because people have underestimated what they thought in the first place or other things. So that's outcome stars, and we can help people with that. And then, as I mentioned before, there's over 1,800 different social value sort of measurement accounting tools and methods. A lot of them are kind of sector led. You know, there's HACT is a housing tool. There are various environmental tools. There's the SDGs. There's TOMS. You know, different. You know, we can share different tools with people when they're ready for that, to look at what might be helpful for them. But it's just thinking about, where do you want to start on your journey with this? Chinna, do you want to just ask a question?
No, sorry, I just realized I haven't, you know, my hand was
Oh,
raised.
that's all right. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. So what I would say, it's horses for courses with any of this stuff. And it comes down to, how much time have you got to spend? How much energy can you throw at this? And how much money have you got to throw at it, you know, as well? You know, and there's keeping it simple, keeping it affordable. And from my point of view, blending methods, I call it, you know, there's blended social accounting, which you're not following one specific track necessarily. You're following a few different methods to get the information that's right for you. There's a good chance most of you don't need to go down an SRROI route, haven't got the money to spend on it if you tried, because it can be pretty expensive, because it's very in-depth and very thorough. But you can pick up elements and aspects of that, and you can certainly quantify potentially certain elements of what you're trying to do, whether you're projecting social value, so whether you're predicting what's going to happen in the future as a result of your community and what you do, or whether if you've got 3 to 5 years track record experience where you can do some in-depth analysis in various ways to look at this. And we're going to look at how you do that. And you don't have to do this on your own, is the bottom line. You don't have to do this on your own. You can get people into help, and we'll come back to that later. So just as some quick examples about how other people might go about this. And I'm not going to go through all of these. You can read these at your leisure on the slides. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of examples. So let's talk about Down syndrome. Down syndrome, they're a charity, Complemented by Guarantee charity. They are an organisation which predominantly focuses on supporting people with different learning differences, and everyone and anyone else, but they're very accessible and open dance kind of school that does various things, you know. So their direct customers are people, so dance trainees, people coming to their classes, people buying tickets to come to their events or their shows and that sort of thing. Various education and learning commissioners who are buying employability and skills outcomes from them, and various SMEs, so small, medium enterprises and corporates. They've tapped into the CSR agenda, and they're doing kind of away days with corporates and other businesses to kind of use dance and inclusive learning and equality and diversity training as a way of bringing in income, the Robin Hood effect, basically, bringing in income from the corporates through away days on certain themes to reinvest profits back in supporting people that might not be able to afford to pay to come, or doing extra inclusion and awareness activities within the community. It talks about what their products and services are. There, won't go into that. And you know, it talks about these different beneficiaries. So who might they need to track, and who might they need to communicate with, and who might have a vested interest in what they're doing, who cares, and you know, where's the value likely to be happening? It's likely to be happening with their dancers, it's likely to be happening with these schools and educators and other trainees. There's likely to be people benefiting from attending these events and conferences that they do, and the business employees that come through their away days, they're all direct beneficiaries. They're accessing their activities, their services, their stuff. And indirectly, so the wider ripple effect will be happening whether or not they've got time, capacity or energy to track it with families, the wider business community, colleges and unis, you know, different venues and cafes and other people, as it says there. So families will be benefiting as a result of you know, their children or their family members having increased confidence, having new skills, feeling motivated and having their aspirations increased to get different kinds of jobs or to go into different pathways into the future that they hadn't, you know, perhaps felt they'd written themselves off before. Schools and different educators will be benefiting in similar ways. The colleges and universities will be benefiting because there'll be young people now applying for college courses in whatever, performing arts, media, who knows what, who perhaps weren't applying before. So their equality and inclusion rates and their widening participation rates will be going up. I put venues and cafes. They've got to hire venues to do shows in, and the cafes and other places around these shows might put on, you know, special menus, or the people will be going for tea or lunch or drinks or whatever before or after a show. So the local economy is benefiting that way. And don't forget that your the colleagues, so your staff, your volunteers, your board are all indirect beneficiaries potentially of what's going on. So it's just showing you who might they need to map, track and start to talk to. If I take one more example, let's go for Met Munch, I think. So Met Munch are a company limited by guarantee. They're a community interest company set up by Halle Moravec, some of you might have heard of, that we've had come and talk before. She worked in Manchester Met, still does, in Manchester Met University, and it's a student-led organisation. And so the student-led organisation is doing all kinds of health promotion, healthy eating work with students and with wider audiences, and they're raising awareness of you know, how to get more nutritious food affordably and how to cook it and all of that. Different customers for their catering services, events and whatever else. Man Met Uni is the main one. Various museums, they've gone and done talks, they've done catering for large conferences, other public sort of food purchases, staff and students at the university and other voluntary community sector organisations who partner with them, other local businesses and corporates are the kinds of people who are buying, you know, either training, speaking stuff or physical food and tools and resources from them. There's all sorts of services that they have and they provide. Again, I'm not going to run through them all again because you start to get the picture, but different organisations benefit, and you'll see from there, you know, food innovation agencies and, you know, the science and nutrition industry. Don't, you know, there may be people much wider than you realise benefiting from the fact that you exist and have got a vested interest in the fact that you run. And so, you know, arts organisations or, you know, the National Agency for whatever your sector is benefiting as a result of you being in existence, because you're boots on the ground delivering to an agenda that somebody nationally, regionally or locally is trying to push. And so don't underestimate the interest and the value that you might be creating for people like them. And you know, until you go and ask them and talk to them, you won't get a take on what they value about you necessarily. So yeah, sometimes you have to talk to these people, and that's what this next slide is all about. So basically, I'm just going to scroll up so I can see what I'm doing. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just shifting people around so I can see. I've alluded to who you might engage with to measure your impact and value. That last slide was showing you some examples to give you some thoughts as to who you might need to talk to, but usually it's a combination of direct, indirect and wider stakeholders. And we have done stakeholder mapping before at different sessions, and there are other webinars on that. As I've said, you need to consider your capacity to do this, your time, your budget, your knowledge and skills. do you want to invite an external support agency in to do this for you for legitimacy? So the likes of somebody like Flourish Together, who do this, and we do social value reports, or we train other people up in how to make the best of doing this sort of thing. There are other people and other agencies that we can link people to for specialist stuff and specifics. It's considering the ratios of who to involve and not just asking. Don't just ask your mates, basically. You know, and who are your champions? Because actually you need to talk to your, not saboteurs, but people who have got the ability to make or break your business. So if you're going to talk to people, and we've got a case study of this in a minute, if you're going to invite, you know, a couple of people to a focus group, or you're going to do some telephone interviews, or you're going to talk to people who've been on your program, you don't just talk to everybody who loved it. You talk to people who perhaps didn't turn up or couldn't get there, or people who wanted to, you know, applied but then never came. Or you don't just talk to the funders that fund you. You talk to the people who don't, to kind of get a sense of, you know, why that might be. And that's why sometimes having somebody independent do this is helpful. But it might also be that you use this as a business development opportunity. This isn't just about creating extra work, you know, putting all of this kind of admin and spreadsheets together. You can use this as a business engagement tool, and that, you know, you can reach out to past customers or prospective customers or prospective investors to talk to them and say, we're having this, you know, we're measuring our social value and an impact right now. We'd really appreciate a quick phone call with you to just ask a series of questions to help broaden our understanding of how organisations like yours might value our work in future, or whatever people have done with you already. So there are, as with anything, there's additional value to be squeezed out of doing social value work. So have a think about that, and it will all make it worthwhile, I suppose. So in the last few minutes before lunch, because I'm sure people are flagging and they need some food, this is just an example, a case study of, you know, what exactly are you evaluating, with who, what and how, to just help you think, how might I go about doing this? And the whole point of this, to show you it isn't rocket science. There's things here that you are doing and will be doing. Might give you some ideas for other stuff, or it might make you work out what you want to do, what you don't want to do, so that you can think about, at a point in time, having somebody independent look at this. You know, if you've got volunteers or board members or the people that can help you with that, if you want to budget for this in certain funding bids or your business plans or whatever going forward. I would say the bigger you get and the more money you're seeking to get from whoever, contracts or from funders or wherever, the more this starts to become important. So getting good practices in at the start is helpful. So we talked about these different stakeholders, anybody that's got a vested interest. We've talked about direct, indirect and wider. And this just gives you, in that case study of Dance Syndrome we talked about, you know, based in Lancashire, and they're doing this, you know, all sorts of inclusive dance and shows and training and diversity inclusion stuff. You know, there's different, all of the different people we've got listed here, you know, the people who attend, the people who benefit, you know, in the bigger picture world as a result, and everyone else. There's different ways to engage them, isn't there? So with the direct beneficiaries, it might be that there's, even at the point of an application form, so if someone's coming on a course, or somebody's making an inquiry, or somebody's coming to an event, what questions are you asking them right at the start to help measure impact and value, and track that or benchmark that against the future, or tell you more about what they're wanting. There might be one-to-one notes from reports or from consultations or from conversations that you've been having that you've already got. There might be surveys or evaluation work that you've done or that you could develop. You might have videoed stuff, events or things, and by asking the right questions through the, you know, your interviews or your creating video content, you can use that to look back on as social value data to analyse. You might want to run focus groups or bring people in to help you run focus groups to kind of ask some of this stuff. As part of events that you're doing, you might ask creative feedback questions, hold post-it situations, or draw me this, or create, you know, there's all sorts of ways that you can get people to give you feedback that doesn't look like surveys. You know, and we could do a show and tell on that one day. Indirectly, again, with some of these people, It might be telephone interviews, surveys, focus group evaluations, and then with the wider world, it's a combination of interviews and focus groups potentially that helps as part of your business networking, your relationship building with different stakeholders, different potential people that want to support what you're doing. And then there's wider market intelligence. There will already be a whole bundle of market intelligence about what you do. Strategic reports, sectoral reports, policy reports, other people's annual reports. Your competitors may have already gone and done swathes of this so that you don't have to. So these are the ways of engaging people to kind of work out what they value about you and what you're doing, or the kind of work that you're doing. And put simply, when you start to work with people, you're asking people these key questions. There's nothing rocket science here. Whether you're doing a one-to-one interview, or you're getting people around a focus group, or you're getting them to stick post-it notes on a wall or draw you a picture about it, you know, initially you're finding out, you know, what are people getting involved with? You're working out what's the priority, what do they value? And so you're not suggesting to them, you're just asking, you know, what are they getting involved with? Describe what has been of most value, what you've enjoyed most. What are you doing differently as a result? These are the questions that the people that don't ask, they stop at the first two. What you need to be asking, what are people doing differently now as a result of coming to you? What could they perhaps attribute some additional value or some specific value to the way your services run, or how your products and activities, you know, made a difference for them and their family and their community? How have things changed or improved as a result? So Carol gave a brilliant example a minute ago about somebody who was, you know, losing weight, spending less money, getting into debt, and, you know, gambling, and now making smoothies and having a great time. I don't know, whatever the example is, but, you know, what's changed? There's attitudinal changes, there's behavior changes, might be cultural changes, there might be physical health, well-being, education, skills, reducing isolation, combating, you know, challenges within the criminal justice system. There's all sorts. And so listen to what they say, and then prompt and probe. And over time, you then learn what they value most, and that's what you focus on, rather than trying to be all things to all people. And likewise, you ask similar stuff of the wider stakeholders, but in a slightly different way, and perhaps in a slightly more remote way. The point of doing this is that you can make informed decisions about, as we were saying, instead of being at the mercy of your funders or at the mercy of commissioners or whoever else, you work out what your key value indicators are. Your consumers, your stakeholders, your beneficiaries, they tell you what they value, and it becomes very simple. They give you the language to promote you. They give you the data that demonstrates your track record, and you focus in on how you're having the most value to them and to the wider world. And it helps you improve your questions, it helps you improve your sort of focus and consistency for the future, and gather different types of qualitative and quantitative data. And potentially then, once you start to see where the value is, probably with some help, you can then work out what are the financial proxies, if you will, what's the cost value of what you're doing. And, you know, it's a whole day's training, or weeks and years of training that, but it's not a million miles away from what you can communicate, quite simply. So in a nutshell, what does it look like when it's done well? This is just to put the power back in your hands again, to think, what could we do? What are we doing already? When it's done well, you know, it really helps you, you know, if you know your audience, you've got some sort of budget or resources for this, and you know in what techniques are going to work in your particular context. So, you know, thorough stakeholder engagement mapping, you know, work out who's got a vested interest, who values something about what you do, from all angles, you know, and then ask them, you know, what do they value, and focusing on measuring what they value. And then patterns emerge, you know, and they're valuing specific things that will jump out and be obvious. And some of it will be exactly what you intended. Some of it you will be writing down in your theory of change, and it's mirroring what you expected. But highly likely there'll be all sorts of other stuff that will help you adapt, shape and focus, but it will also perhaps help you develop new services, or consider new partners, or consider new funds as a result. And you can really, as I say, if you're creating value in 5 or 6 key areas, you know, because you can just see it, they're telling you it, 98% of people have said this, or, you know, 75% of people have said that, you know, or you know, we can show you how to do this, but it basically, it jumps out at you. Techniques we've kind of gone through, so I'm not going to go over those, but there's different techniques for how you might figure that out. And then it's the analysis and the communication is where people probably need to then start having some help, you know, at different stages. And by, you know, having, you know, independent support, bringing in consultants, or training somebody in your team to help with this a bit more thoroughly, means that you can then, you know, keep costs down on some of this stuff. But I just wonder whether anybody's got any key questions. There are, as I say, there are other sessions on this where I've gone into a bit more depth on some of this stuff. And I also get to the point, which I'm not going to do now because I want to have a lunch break, where we start to share with you what you do with this information once you've found it. But ultimately, it goes into specific reports. It helps you report back to funders or the KIC regulator, creates great testimonials or videos. It, you know, there's some examples of some key value indicators here that we work through with Horseherd that I mentioned on. So they now focus, you know, tracking and measuring value in key areas rather than trying to measure everything, so that it gives them the best quality data for you know, marketing and securing bids and everything else. Ooh, I'm just looking down there. Might need people to come off mute. Do you have any good sources? Marketing intelligence reports, loads. Yeah, as a student. Well, I say loads, yes and no. For me, so yeah, there's all the Mintel reports and things like that that you can get from the libraries, isn't there? And it's a bit of a faff. You can pay subscriptions to certain things. For me, the best reports are more likely to be government reports, or, you know, so you know, the five-way forward, you know, NHS review. Look at what the latest reports are for, you know, Public Health England, or for the NHS, or for specific government departments or groups. There's an organisation called IPPR that they do great reports. You know, who are the agency in the know? You know, so it might be like the Autism Society, or it might be it's case by case. So I'd say talk to your coach or ask me another time for the specifics of your sector. But there's oodles of stuff out there that you can just take because it's sitting there in the public domain. Right, I want to make sure we get a lunch break and we get a good 20 minutes or so. I'm sorry, it's kind of rolled on a wee bit there, but I'm going to draw the session to a close here, and by all means get in touch with us if you're needing more information or you need some help with some of this stuff. And thanks for listening so far.